Hi, this is Lance Wallnau with the news, the way you don't normally hear it. And that's my personal news theme, music. Did you like it? Hey, here's a verse for you. If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. That's from Proverbs chapter 24. And so when you're looking at current events, why don't you remember this, that there's a way to see what's happening as news, and then there's a way to find that silver lining of what God is doing in the news, and that's what I want to bring you every week. I want to be able to bring you a perspective that's prophetic and inspiring on what's happening. So, for instance, I don't want to hear any more about, angry people and salacious accusations of women abused from Hollywood to media to wherever. But I can't help but notice that Al Franken, this is like that wrecking ball thing I'm talking about, that some of the most vociferous and aggressive and cynical voices that have been anti-Trump from the beginning are coming upon, it's almost like, I'm just going to tell you what I believe it is, and this is infuriating to people to think about this. But if you touch, as I've said, Donald Trump is a Cyrus that God has anointed. If you really come against the anointed of God and you are persistent in that, at some point you're setting yourself up to have your own house examined. And that's exactly what's happening right now in the House, and it's happening in the Senate. Now, you got Judge Roy Moore. If that isn't a screwball thing right there, I mean, people are asking what my opinion is on this. If it's hard to support a candidate that has as many people that are lining up and saying things like, has come against Roy Moore. But what kills the left is that when you go to look at it closely, they had an attorney this week who was actually speaking on behalf of some kind of inappropriate thing that the judge did, signing a yearbook, only to find out that the yearbook had like the initials DB next to it, which means that his assistant, who is a woman, actually signed the yearbook so that it couldn't have been him saying something or doing something inappropriate at the signing. You see, and so they couldn't. So when the left is that eager to bury you, that they're making stuff up, they kill their own credibility. So now it's really a mess. But then to the rescue comes Al Franken, and I was going to say, and he's got himself in a mess right now because he has been such an outspoken virtuoso about coming against Trump and any kind of a Weinstein, affairs going on out there in California. Now he's got his own situation to deal with. But then I'm thinking, the president couldn't leave it alone today. So he's trumping. The president now has got the news story as him talking about Al Franken. And so it's just, I'm telling you, you actually have to sit back and look at the news cycle and say, in the midst of all the chaos, what is God doing? And I'll tell you what God is doing. God is actually restructuring America and causing us to have a pendulum that is coming around to, you may reject faith, you may reject religion, but guess what? There's an ultimate morality. Some things are right and some things are wrong. And in a generation which is, with the left, what they're doing is they're throwing away all definitions of gender and who are you to say this is right and wrong. But lo and behold, there's a tremendous consensus when it comes to the women's issues that there is an ultimate right and wrong. So somehow America's discovering its moral baseline. Now, what I want you to think about is this. Ben Shapiro, I got his face here for a reason. Shapiro, such a smart guy. He pointed out that when the Democrats call for an ethics committee investigation, it's the safest place to go. And the reason for that is, from 2007 to 2016, and get this, there have been 613 allegations that were investigated, 75 that went to the preliminary stage of really being taken seriously, and absolute zero actually resulting in any ethics decision from the Senate. So Shapiro's argument is that having the Senate investigate you is the safest place to go if you're a senator, because they had zero investigations leading to convictions as a result of that. But the news, this title in the news is the one that got me this week when I saw it. 77% of Democrats with four-year degrees think sex is not determined at birth. Now, to be fair, I think the way that the question was asked was whether or not a person is a man or a woman, you know, in terms of the assignment at birth, which would come from the doctor. But the fact that 77% of Democrats with a 4-year degree think that sex is determined at birth. Don't you find that kind of shocking? I mean, I found that like shocking. I asked for what's the most outrageous like headline that ever came out of a National Enquirer, and here's the one that came up on Google: Bigfoot kept lumberjack as love slave. Now that, for me, would be about as predictable as believing that 77% of America's most educated Democrats would actually believe that sex is not determined at birth. And then you can see the data right there in terms of like the various, you know, where millennials are, and Gen Xers are. But what is incredible to me is, and you have to look at this thing as a constant drip feeding of a narrative that has gotten so into the bloodstream of Americans that we actually are not sure if a boy or a girl is born, male or female, by looking at their anatomy when they're born. And that is pretty trippy. The big news that you really need to keep an eye on is that the resistance has kind of gotten sideways. You know, the Trump resistance, they started off, it's hard to believe, it was just yesterday it seemed, that the Antifa was, you know, rioting, and that women were going on the march in Washington. And now what we have is putting the resistance back in the resistance. And of course, Soros is going to be doing a 3-day conference. And it's in Carlsbad, California. It's a secret meeting, but I'm telling you about it now. It's the Democracy Alliance's latest secret donor meeting with the top paying liberal contributors, meeting with key political leaders. And they're going to be conspiring. And of course, this time they're telling everybody, don't do social media and don't tell anybody our secret plans, because we want to be able to surprise everyone when we come out. But I just want you to know that while you think things are just going to dial down and go back to normal, that George is meeting with Nancy Pelosi. And so Nancy is meeting, and they're going to be drilling down deep on how to overthrow Trump. And I'm going to tell you something. It's not going to work. The fundamental flaw in George Soros's secret strategy is that it's never secret. What he does is he funds discontent. You know what's incredible? Is that everybody's upset with Russia because, as I showed you in the last broadcast, Russia did interfere in the American election cycle, but they didn't interfere in the way that people think. They didn't interfere in order to get Trump elected. What they found at Facebook and at Twitter and at Google was an immense amount of advertising energy that went in to exploiting divisions in America. And this is, to me, such an inexcusable thing, that there was an intentional race baiting. If you were white, for instance, there were Facebook ads that would talk about standing with policemen against, you know, criminals. And if you were black, then it was an article that was from the same source on black people are being shot down by police. In other words, it's as though what Putin's game is to see democracy fail in America so that America gets weakened. But the amazing thing is, why are they upset with Russia? Soros' strategy is to do that. He's the one who's funding the underground movements, and from the Black Lives Matter protests all the way to the left with Antifa. You'll trace it out. This is what the Democracy Alliance is all about. So forget Russia. We're doing it to ourselves. And the sooner that we smarten up, the better. Now, in a rare moment, I want you to see this video footage. I very seldom find Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch is like he's like watching paint dry. He's one of the most non-interesting political figures, and he gets elected every year. And when you see Orrin Hatch, he's predictably like a senator would be, which is boring. But he's a nice guy. I mean, he just radiates niceness. For him to get upset, and he's the chairman of the committee, I want you to watch this, because my frustration with leftists and really aggressive liberal Democrats is they are so dang pushy and obnoxious. And conservatives are always so worried about offending people and so polite. And after the shooting incident with the church in Texas, right away, Cuomo in New York is coming out, and these guys are just mouthing off against prayer. I mean, they're just so there's such an antichrist spirit as far as I'm concerned that they don't understand the difference between prayer as a legitimate expression of spirituality, and they just politicize everything. So it was an interesting moment here where Senator Brown is doing his typical media moment, talking about the Republicans are always for the rich. And they know for a fact that this tax bill is not about that. But they're going to play the talking points, and Orrin Hatch loses it. And I think it's great that Orrin lost it. But I want you to hear the one line that so stood out to me and touched me. He said, you know, if the Senate would really just ever work together for the American people, can you imagine what we could get done? It was a moment of rare candor, talking about the political games. And this is what this movement is about. If you want to know why I'm doing the news, I'm covering the news, but I'm saying God is a wrecking ball, breaking the institutional stronghold of darkness off of the entertainment mountain, off of the media mountain. Everybody knows it's bias. Now it's breaking off the political mountain, and it's going to continue its course through academia because America can be saved if enough believers like you don't switch this off after 2 or 3 minutes and go on to watching a cat video, but actually focus on what's happening and get engaged in America's destiny. So watch Orrin Hatch and watch him just, bam, lose it. And it's so refreshing to see somebody really care.
Before we go home, to just acknowledge, well, this tax cut really is not for the middle class, it's for the rich. And that whole thing about higher wages, well, it's a good selling point. But we know companies don't just give away higher wages. They just don't give away higher wages just because they have more money. Corporations are sitting on a lot of money now. They're sitting on a lot of profits now. I don't see wages going up. So just spare us the bank shots, spare us the sarcasm and the satire, and let's
I'm going to spare it, but I'm going to just say to you that I come from the poor people, and I've been here working my whole stinking career for people who don't have a chance. And I really resent anybody saying that I'm just doing this for the rich. Give me a break. I think you guys overplay that all the time, and it gets old. And frankly, you ought to quit it.
Mr. Chairman, the public.
I'm not through. I get kind of sick and tired of it. True, it's a nice political play.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
not true.
With all due respect, I get sick and tired of the richest people
Regular
in
order,
this country
Mr. Chairman.
getting richer and
Regular order.
richer.
Order.
We do a tax
Regular order.
rich and middle class
Wait a minute.
Regular order.
and over and over again.
Wait just
How many
a second.
times do we do this before we learn this, Mr. Chairman?
Listen, I've honored you by allowing you to spout off here. And what you said was not right. That's all I'm saying. I come from the lower middle class originally. We didn't have anything. So don't spew that stuff on me. I get a little tired of that crap. And let me just say something. If we worked together, we could pull this country out of every mess it's in. And we could do a lot of the things that you're talking about, too. And I think I've got a reputation of having worked together with Democrats.
Let's start with Chip.
I'm not starting with Chip. I did it. I've done it for years. I've got more bills.
Start with Chip today.
I got more bills passed than everybody on this committee put together. And they've been passed for the benefit of people in this country. Now, all I can say is I like you personally very much, but I'm telling you, this bullcrap that you guys throw out here really gets old after a while. To do it right at the end of this was just not right. And it takes a lot to get me worked up.
Could you feel the energy on that? I mean, it's like, ugh, so tense, so tense. But remember what I read to you earlier. If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. We have to build our capacity. You can't hide out from what's happening in America right now. You got to actually see it and discern. Now, you remember last week when I was talking about the infamous Steele dossier, that marvelous piece of fiction that made it into the Senate for a hearing on Donald Trump with collusion with Russia. I said all along that John McCain's got his fingerprints on this. And it came out this week. And he's declined comment on it. Where is that report? I have it over here somewhere. But that's Soros' thing. But McCain actually came out as being one of the insiders who had access to the dossier as soon as it was available. Not in January when it was released, but in November. And remember what I said, that he had talked about how he had run across it, but in fact what he didn't say is it was put into his hands by the founder of Fusion GPS. In other words, the company hired to do the dirty work and put the fake document together. Actually, the guy who started that company, Fusion GPS, gave a copy to McCain personally. So it's going to come out eventually that John McCain actually was advancing this dossier through the ranks in order to destroy the presidency of Donald Trump. In essence, to overturn the will of people like you that voted for him. The other news that I think is worth knowing is about China. You know, I'm watching China with a great deal of interest because Christians have a tendency to be very sentimental about nations. And I'm in that same group because, you know, we believe all things, love, hopes all things. And because we know that there are Christians that are converting in China, like 10% of the population is Christian, we think there's some kind of a warming up that's going on. The reality is that China is actually coming down hard on religious freedom because the president of China, in an epic and an unusual moment, delivered a 3.5-hour speech to, I believe it's the 14th Party Congress, and they elevated him to the status of Mao. That means that the Chinese government has never had a leader in our lifetime that is as strongly representative of the will of the Communist Party as he is, as this president is, and President Xi. And it's the 19th Party Congress, not the 14th. But the fact that Bannon and his and Breitbart is zeroing in on this reminds me of something. I said that Donald Trump was the president who fulfills like a Cyrus type, and that God raises up people to these roles, and that is in the government mountain. I want to declare openly, in spite of all the negative press that Steve Bannon has received, I'm convinced he's the most prophetic guy in media and is the Cyrus in the media mountain. And that you need to be listening twice to what he says, because he says that China is the greatest threat to the future of the United States that is out there. And he says it quoting President Xi's speech, because in the president's presentation, he expressed how ultimately the system in China will be able to have victory over the Judeo-Christian, liberal, democratic, free market West. And what Bannon says is that their plan is to dominate us in 5 key areas. And I'm going to read this to you quickly, but I want you to catch this. The first is going to be a new generation of mobile technology called 5G. It's going to surpass our technology. The second area is going to be a transport system that's going to go through Asia, connecting China to the Middle East. Now, all my Christian friends say that One Belt, One Road initiative is part of a prophetic fulfillment of China and Asia bringing the gospel to the Middle East. But while they're all, you know, high-fiving each other over Christians going down that business road in order to bring the gospel to the Middle East, I'll tell you that China's purpose is to wrap that belt all the way around to strangle the West economically. The third characteristic of their agenda is that by the year 2025, their stated objective is that they will have 10 industries that are going to dominate the United States and the world. And they are way ahead already. I'm going to tell you 3 areas where they're already way ahead, because America is divided. Our greatest challenge is division. It's like a house divided cannot stand. Silicon Valley is so in bed with leftist, liberal antagonism to Trump that they wouldn't even meet with the president. You remember that when the Antifa incident happened in Charleston? They got up and left. They won't even meet with the president who's trying to invigorate Silicon Valley. Their robotics is the second area China's beating us in, and artificial intelligence, AI, artificial intelligence. China's actually surpassing the West in these areas. So, and the other two areas I want to give you real briefly, and this is very scary, is conversion of all oil transactions, get this, into Chinese currency. What they want to do is they want to end the dollar as the global reserve currency. What happens if they can create the conversion of all oil transactions into Chinese currency? Well, then we will be forced to pay off our $20 trillion debt instead of pumping it out into the world with an inflated dollar. And while economics may be elusive to a lot of you, or even me, at times I have to sit down and ask somebody, explain to me how this works. Here's what that means. No nation in history has ever been able to go to the printing press and print their own money, print their way out of debt. What we do is we keep getting in deeper debt and printing money, and the world, in a sense, uses our money. The day that the world puts the dollar back at our door, America would end up like one of those banana republics like Venezuela. And because America's lost its moral strength, its unity around America, its sense of patriotism, not entirely, but if you let the leftists and the academicians continue to defile the minds of the next generation of millennials, we'll have anarchy in the streets. You won't have the decency and self-restraint that was characteristic of America during the Great Depression. You'll have cities on fire. That's what the left will end up doing in America, and that's why you are important, because that's not God's plan for America, but that is a plan that some people have. And finally, fifth, financial technology. Bannon said the true piece of leverage that with North Korea is the ability to decouple countries from the world's financial system, to be able to sanction companies, to be able to shut banks off from capital markets. He predicted that in 5 to 10 years, that ability will be gone. That China and Russia right now, I'm sorry to say, is at the back door helping North Korea. Russia's a bad actor in a lot of ways, and I'm sorry to say that. But we have really got to pray that the church smartens up, and we got to find another way of understanding how to influence these nations. They don't have to be goat nations. China and Russia don't have to be goat nations. There are strong Christians there. But like America, they're uninformed Christians. I want to give you this important analysis of China, South Korea, and the Trump trip. And most people have totally missed this. And they missed it because the news, it was going so good for Donald Trump that the news had to ignore it. So there was no coverage of it. But that's telling you when Trump's actually having a successful time. But what I want you to notice is, you see that picture there? This is the picture of the Asian group. And let me see, can you see Russia meddling over? Can you see Russia embedded in that? Look at that. What is Putin doing in this picture? That's what I'm trying to figure out. This is supposed to be Trump's trip to Korea, and there's Putin. What the heck? So anyway, whatever Putin's doing with the Asian trip, what the president did when he was in China, when he was in Vietnam, when he was in South Korea, was nothing short of phenomenal. I estimate over $500 billion, $500 billion worth of business Donald Trump generated for the United States that's going to result in hundreds of thousands of jobs. Did you hear that covered in the news? Did you know that he had basically aligned Asia in agreement against North Korea, solidified our partnership with Asia, and then squeezed every transaction in order to create a new job in the United States? And he did that. $500 billion worth of business was developed in those nations for the United States. President Obama never once went over there and came back with anything other than more drain on the American economy. But you won't hear about that news from your typical news channel. What you are going to do is you're going to hear it from me here. We should be thankful that we have the president that we do have, America has its challenges. But I want you to know that what's happening right now in the news cycle, what's happening even with Senator Franken, what's happening with Hollywood, what's happening with the credibility of media, what's happening economically, God is doing something. And what are we supposed to do during this window? It's Thanksgiving coming up, right? Honestly, this is a great time to take your focus off of what is bad that's happening in the world and be thankful. Be thankful because God has heard our prayers and God is at work. And you can't expect the devil to tell you good news, but I'm telling you that in the bad news, there's good news, because sometimes the good news is God has to uproot. There's in the first chapter of Jeremiah, my concluding thought, and this is a word for somebody right now. In the first chapter of Jeremiah, the prophet, the young prophet, was given words that he was to proclaim. And you know what Jeremiah was told? Now listen to this. He was told that the Lord put something into his mouth, and then the Lord said that I put my words in your mouth. Now listen to this, that this day I've set you over nations and over kingdoms to root out, pull down, destroy, throw down, in order to build and to plant. Do you hear that? 4 times as much energy has to go into dismantling what the enemy's done as the 2 words that describe the building and planting. So what you're seeing in America right now in this time of Reformation is a lot of uprooting and pulling down. And yes, there's tremendous stridency and there's tremendous strife that you're hearing in media. But remember this, the media is controlled by a remnant of people who are ideologically locked against God. And therefore, you should expect them to be prolifically negative whenever there's something positive happening. So you got to learn how to reverse the news cycle for yourself. Now, I pray for you that during Thanksgiving, you will avoid updating any of your friends and family members who don't share the same political views as you. Avoid these conversational points that I just went through. Don't discuss transgender things, but try to find, if any way possible, common ground. Jesus said that when you go to court with somebody, try to make peace with them along the way. Try to find the common ground. Avoid the trap of the enemy of breaking apart relationships. Sometimes my wife and I, we have family members that were so hypersensitive because I would do things like write a book like this and promote it. And the only way that we could deal with it was actually ignore what they said. And so sometimes remember this, you're not dealing with a person, you're dealing with a spirit that is trying to break relationships. So I pray for you, not only that you'll have eyes to be thankful for the things you should be thankful for, but I pray that you will be an ambassador of grace and favor and wit and self-control, and that you're going to be able to dominate the environment around you by bringing peace and joy into the atmosphere. And in the name of Jesus, America, I believe, is going through a great reformation. And you need to be part of it. By the way, if you want to get the insider reports and resources and materials that I'm sending out to our network of people that are mobilizing throughout the United States, in every state, for the next 10 months, 11 months, boom, to shift these states in alignment with what we believe God wants to do, check out the 7M Underground at 7mu.com and join the conversation. And we have some powerful new tools and resources I want you to be able to get your hands on at 7mu.com. I'll see you again shortly.